I adjusted the sleeves of my $25.00 clearance rack blazer and slid into my usual spot at the end of the Pacific Trust Capital weekly meeting in San Diego. As always, my older brother Brandon didn't glance my way, too busy flashing his Omega watch and boasting about his latest acquisition. Closed a $600 million 0 cents deal this morning, he announced smugly to the table of eager associates. Third one this quarter. Not bad for 36, huh? I sipped my coffee, hiding the smile tugging at my lips. If only they knew. If only they realized their underappreciated market researcher had been the one quietly architecting those very deals, positioning assets and feeding Brandon just enough to let his ego do the rest. I'm Naomi Keller. Most people at Pacific Trust know me as Nia Kendall, the quiet contract analyst on the 10th floor. What they don't know is that I'm also the founder and CEO of ArcLight Equity Group, a global private equity firm that has outpaced Pacific Trust for 5 years running. Naya! Brandon's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. Those valuation briefs. My office. Noon. And try not to mess them up this time. I gave a polite nod. Of course, Mr. Keller. 10 years ago, I would have fired back. But I've since learned there's real power in being overlooked. It all began 10 years ago, right in this very boardroom. I was 24, fresh out of Stanford's MBA program, full of idealism and untested strategies. I'd come ready to offer ideas. Private equity is about finding value where others don't look, I explained to my Uncle Charles, then CEO of the firm. It's about seeing long-term impact, not just quarterly spikes. Spare us the lectures, Brandon interrupted. Why don't you stick to color-coding charts? You're good at that. Uncle Charles chuckled. Your dad used to talk like that too. And where did that get him? My father, David Keller, died when I was 13. Branded the family failure for wanting to build rather than bleed markets dry. The truth? He was days from landing a game-changing deal when a plane crash ended it all. That meeting was a turning point. I realized I'd never be taken seriously as long as I carried the Keller name. That night, I wired every penny of my $48,000 0 cents savings into forming ArcLight Equity Group, a name meant to carry my father's legacy quietly into the light. The only one who ever truly believed in me was my grandmother on my mom's side, Margaret Ellis. She used to say, "Let them overlook you. It's easier to strike when they're not looking." Wise woman. So for appearances, I kept my junior position at Pacific Trust Capital. But every night, back in my tiny one-bedroom apartment in Hillcrest, I was building something greater. The first year nearly broke me. 80-hour weeks, spreadsheets by day, strategic modeling by night. I took my father's unfinished notes, his vision for an algorithm that could predict undervalued markets with behavioral triggers, and brought them into the modern age. The code was clunky at first, but I stuck with it. Eventually, I spotted a trend in Southeast Asia that no one else had clocked. While Brandon bragged about adding a private theater to his fourth home, I was funneling small, surgical investments through ArcLight Equity. Within 6 months, they tripled. I lived like a broke intern, poured every cent back into the company, and stayed invisible. ArcLight exploded. But no one, not Brandon, not Uncle Charles, knew the name behind it. I built a team of silent stars, former hedge funders, code junkies, ex-activists, people who wanted to change the game, not just play it. And we did. One morning, Mallory from HR leaned into my cubicle. "You hear about ArcLight? Just bought Synercom. People say it's the tech move of the year." I blinked up from my cluttered desk, covered in old reports and coffee-ranged folders. "Really? Huh." She laughed. "You've been here a decade. You could ask for a window office at least." I smiled. "I'm good here." But I was winning. While they chased recognition, I reshaped supply chains and energy markets from behind a curtain. The money? I could have bought a mansion in La Jolla or flown private to Milan. Instead, I kept my second-hand Corolla and sat quietly while Uncle Charles once said at a board meeting, "That Naomi girl could learn something from ArcLight's founder. Elizabeth Clark, now that's a visionary." He even held up the Forbes cover I'd given that interview for, done from my darkened home office, disguised with a slightly deeper voice and subtle contouring. 2 lives, 1 truth. And it was getting harder to keep the mask on. If Naomi's double life has you hooked, don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens when her real identity finally comes face to face with the family that wrote her off. My apartment might have been modest, but it held a secret few could imagine. A hidden room behind the closet, lined with encrypted servers, secure comms, and a soundproof wall for confidential calls. My sick days at Pacific Trust Capital were always perfectly timed, with ArcLight Equities executive meetings. I even maintained 2 completely separate wardrobes. Naomi Keller wore department store markdowns and scuffed flats. But Elizabeth Clark? She wore sharp, minimalist suits hand-tailored in Milan, only for the rare moments when the CEO had to step into the spotlight. The double life wore on me. There were days I wanted to slam my quarterly reports on Brandon's desk, pull off the blazer and tell them all who I really was, just to watch their smug faces twist in disbelief. But I knew better. Power isn't just about truth. It's about timing. And that time was almost here. Just last week, Brandon stormed into the bullpen, nearly bouncing with excitement. "We're closing the biggest merger in firm history," he said breathlessly. "Anderson Corp, $10 billion. Deal of the decade." He had no idea ArcLight Equity owned controlling shares in Anderson Corp, and the merger, it didn't move forward unless Elizabeth Clark said yes. For 10 years, I'd watched Brandon climb higher by stepping on others. I didn't need revenge. I needed a reckoning, a quiet one, clean, precise. The final meeting was scheduled for Friday. Brandon, Uncle Charles, and the entire executive board would be in that room, eagerly waiting to meet the elusive Elizabeth Clark. Little did they know, she had been getting their coffee for a decade. I looked at the clock. Time for another charade. I gathered my purposely disorganized folders and adjusted my worn-out blazer with its fraying cuffs. "Keller," Brandon barked. "Do you have those financials?" "Right here, Mr. Keller," I said, keeping my voice even. 1 more week. A decade of sacrifice, silence, and shadow work had led to this moment. That morning, I walked into the office as Naomi Keller one last time. Hair tied messily, shoes worn thin, invisible. Mallory passed by my desk. "Can you believe it? We finally meet Elizabeth Clark today." I smiled behind my screen. "Oh, Mallory, you're about to..." I nodded, masking the smirk tugging at my lips. "I hear she's very discerning," I said, voice low. Brandon was already strutting through the office like he owned half of Wall Street, his new Italian suit practically sparkling under the fluorescent lights. "Elizabeth Clark is going to be blown away," he declared loud enough for the entire bullpen to hear. "This merger? It's legacy defining." If he only knew. At 9 a.m., I casually stood and shuffled my reports together. "Mr. Keller," I called out, just loud enough for him to hear. "I'm not feeling great, might take the afternoon off." He didn't even glance up from his phone. "Fine. Just finished the reports." Instead of heading to the lobby, I keyed into the elevator's restricted access floor, straight to the private suite I leased under a shell company. In less than 30 minutes, Naomi Keller ceased to exist. In her place stood Elizabeth Clark, ArcLight Equity's elusive founder. Gone were the loose curls and clearance rack blazer. My tailored navy suit hugged every precise line. My hair, sleek and pinned, my presence, undeniable. The merger meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 1:55, I stood behind tinted glass, watching them all file into the main conference room. Brandon looked like a kid waiting for Christmas morning. Uncle Charles checked his watch 3 times in 60 seconds. My phone buzzed. Message from my executive assistant. "Cars ready. Private entrance secured." I took a breath, grounding myself in memory. My father's words echoed. "Let your work speak. Don't just arrive. Own the room." At exactly 2:00, I stepped through the executive entrance. Silence fell like a hammer. Chairs shifted. Eyes widened, some jaws dropped. "Gentlemen," I said, voice calm, confident, meant to be heard. "Shall we begin?" Brandon leapt up. "Miss Clark, we've been so looking forward to—" "The Anderson Corp merger," I interrupted, moving past his outstretched hand. "Yes, I'm familiar with your ambitions." Uncle Charles leaned in, smiling. "We've prepared a detailed presentation. We're confident." I placed my leather portfolio on the table and took the seat at the head. "That won't be necessary," I said. "I've already reviewed your materials." A pause. "In fact, I've been reviewing Pacific Trust's operations for some time now." Brandon's smile twitched. "Your business model is—" I let the word hang. "Fascinating. Especially the part about taking credit for work you didn't do." And with that, the real meeting began. Manipulating market positions, undermining talent because it threatens your ego. That's not leadership. It's fear in a tailored suit. The room went still. You could hear the air conditioner hum. "I don't understand," Brandon stammered, his voice suddenly brittle. "Pacific Trust has always operated with the highest standards." "Really?" I opened the slim leather folder in front of me, sliding a set of documents across the table. "Like when you claimed credit for the Southeast Asia equity model that was actually built by a junior researcher." I turned my eyes to him. "Or when you intentionally blocked promotions for employees who challenged you intellectually." Uncle Charles had gone pale. "Miss Clark, I can assure you—" "Don't," I said firmly, lifting a hand. "Save it for someone who hasn't spent the last decade inside your organization." Their confusion cracked into something worse. Realization. Slow. Creeping. Undeniable. And then, Uncle Charles's eyes widened in horror. "No," he breathed. "It can't be." I smiled calmly, reaching up to remove the contact lenses that had softened my eye color all these years. "Hello, Uncle Charles." I turned to Brandon. "Surprised to see your junior analyst sitting at this end of the table?" He blinked. "Naomi, you're... You can't be." "Elizabeth Clark," I said, sitting back in my chair with measured ease, "founder and CEO of ArcLight Equity." "Yes." "For the last 10 years. While they were busy ignoring the quiet girl from HR, I was building one of the most powerful equity firms in the industry." Around the room, board members stared. Some were stunned, others visibly impressed. "This is a trick," Brandon muttered. "You're just—" "Careful," I said flatly, locking eyes with him. "You're about to insult the woman who can tank your $10 billion murder with one sentence." That shut him up. I flipped open a second folder. "Now, let's talk about what happens next." ArcLight Equity would not approve the merger, not as it stood. "You can't do this," Uncle Charles said, finding his voice. "The shareholders will be fascinated by the internal practices of this firm," I cut in, "unless we negotiate something better." And so, for the next hour, I laid out my terms. A full restructuring. Brandon and Charles would step down. Promotions based on performance, not bloodlines. "You planned this," Charles whispered. Ed shook my head. "No, I earned this." "I've been building something real for a decade," I said quietly. "This wasn't revenge. It was the natural conclusion." They filed out of the conference room, deflated. Brandon lingered near the doorway. "Why?" he asked, his voice no longer arrogant. "Why stay here, pretending to be her?" I met his eyes for the first time in years. "Because to fix a broken system, you have to see it from the inside. Everything ArcLight became, it came from watching what not to do." The next morning, headlines exploded across every business outlet. Reclusive CEO, Elizabeth Clark unmasked as Naomi Keller, analyst at Pacific Trust. Secret takeover completed. The market ate it up. ArcLight's stock surged 20% in a day. People loved the idea of a billionaire who built her empire from a cubicle. A ghost in plain sight. I kept my old nameplate, Naomi Keller, market analyst, on the corner of my new desk, now stationed in the top floor office of what was once Pacific Trust's headquarters. Mallory stopped by last week, still trying to process it all. All those times I told you to ask for a raise? I laughed. Consider yourself promoted. I need people who believed in Naomi, not just Elizabeth. Brandon and Uncle Charles quietly retired to spend time with family. Brandon's apparently writing a memoir about humility. I doubt it'll be accurate, but at least he's finally writing his own words. And me? I finally bought a new blazer. But the old one, the frayed one, I keep hanging behind my door. A symbol that titles and power mean nothing without purpose. The company's thriving now. Turns out, when you stop promoting people based on bloodlines and start rewarding actual merit, amazing things happen. We launched a mentorship program for overlooked employees, people like me, once invisible. Late one night, I passed a conference room and heard a young analyst presenting a brilliant proposal on inefficiencies in renewable infrastructure. Brandon would have written her off on sight. Wrong background, wrong last name. Instead, she's now leading the new sustainability division. You saw something in me, she said quietly after her promotion. No, I replied. I saw you. Sometimes, that's all people need. Someone who sees past the surface. As for the merger, we approved a revised version, one that protected jobs, one that put innovation first, one that finally reflected the kind of company we were becoming. The business journals called it a masterclass in long game strategy. I called it justice. My father's old walnut desk now sits in the corner of my new office, refinished, restored, and gleaming in the California sun. It's the same desk he once used in his tiny startup before they called him a failure. On it, I keep two nameplates side by side: Elizabeth Clark, CEO, and Naomi Keller, analyst. Both are me. Both mattered. Just like success, it doesn't always wear a name tag or walk in through the front door. When people ask if I regret those 10 hidden years, I think about the wisdom they gave me. Every snide remark taught me empathy. Every time my voice was ignored, I learned how to amplify others. Every bit of dismissal became momentum. So no, I wouldn't change a thing. Sometimes the most powerful companies are built in silence, by people no one bothered to see. And honestly, the expression on Brandon's face, when he realized who I truly was worth every forgotten coffee run and late night in a cubicle. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks in quietly and takes the head seat at the table. If my story resonated with you, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below, share what part hit you the hardest, or tell me about a time you were underestimated and kept going anyway, because trust me, I know what it feels like to be overlooked, talked down to, and told to stay in your lane. But I also know what it means to rise quietly, to build in silence, and to let your results speak louder than their opinions ever could. If you believe in rooting for the ones no one saw coming, support this channel. Subscribe, comment, share this story. Help others see that not all success comes with applause. Sometimes, it comes after years of grit, grace, and patience. And if you're in a season of being ignored right now, take heart. Use that time. Study the cracks in the system. Learn, grow, and build your foundation brick by quiet brick. One day, they'll look up and realize they should have paid attention long ago. Because sometimes the greatest power move is to simply become everything they said you couldn't. And when that day comes, I'll be cheering for you from the top.